Yate Ishpanana, Shie-Ya Amber DuBosie-Shepherd, Manager of Education and Outreach here at the Mabee-Gerrer Museum of Art. Today I would like to show y'all some Navajo rugs from our back collection. I have a special interest in rugs. My great-grandmother, Louise Begay, from Lukachuka area on the Navajo Reservation, she was a Navajo weaver. She passed many years ago, but I got to grow up with her, and under her teachings I actually got to make my own Navajo rug, and so maybe at some point I can do a video on that. But today I decided to dress up a little bit. I'm wearing half traditional clothing. I have my moccasins, my Navajo woven moccasins. They're the wraparound, so these are the female style. I have my necklaces, my jewelry, and then I have my hair in a traditional Navajo bun here. But today, I had some help from my mother, who grew up with my great-grandmother, and so she knew about weaving. She would watch my great-grandmother weave a lot, and so she helped me figure out some of the symbolism behind some of these pieces, and some of these pieces are very old. Navajo weaving is still done today. There's more contemporary styles, more brighter colors, but a lot of what we're going to show here today is more traditional. So we're going to take a first look at this piece here. So Navajo rugs are made from sheep wool. This is a large piece, so this would have taken time. Each strand is done by itself, singularly. So this one would have had different layers. So you would have a string here, string here, string here, string here, string. So as you went up on your design. So they're very complicated. There is some math involved. A lot of the Navajo weavers are female. There are some male weavers, but majority are female. And with these pieces, I think many of them are made by ladies, but like I said, there were some males, and a lot of the women would take care of sheep, herds of sheep. My great-grandmother had her own herd of sheep, and they were like her children. She took really good care of them. She would shear them. We would also butcher them. So she knew how to butcher, she knew how to shear her sheep, she knew how to cart the wool, and she would make her own wool. And there was once when I was a child where I actually got to see her dye it in these huge giant metal pans. So that was really interesting. And it was a lot of work. I was little, so I didn't have to participate, but she really knew what she was doing. But with this piece here, this is an eye dazzler rug. And the reason it's called an eye dazzler rug is because of the design. So if you were to, it kind of makes, it's almost like an optical illusion in a way, because there's so many colors and then the design is so specific and they're repeating. It kind of makes your eyes kind of wander and do weird things like an optical illusion. This also gave a chance for weavers to express their individual artistry, more of a contemporary and modernism style. So this was starting to come very popular, and people could do different designs to create the eye dazzlers. There's even some that are like diamond shaped, and they're just repeating diamond shape. This one, there's also certain eye dazzlers, like this one you can actually see the back side here. If we were to roll it out, there are some that actually have different colors and different patterns on both sides, on different sides. So you could flip it and it'd be something different. Those ones are actually really hard to make, so if you do see those, they're definitely worth, if you can purchase it, they're definitely worth purchasing. They're very hard to do. It actually involves, instead of 2 strings on the loom, it's like 4 strings, and then you have to bind them in the center. So those can be really difficult. But that's some beautiful colors. We were looking at this earlier, and we're believing that these are natural dyes because of the way the colors are kind of fading. This is an old piece. Apparently it's 1895 is kind of when this is dated, which sounds about right. It's an old piece. You can also tell from the very top where it's kind of coming apart just a little bit. But this is still a beautiful piece, very nice. And it's well done. And what I like about this too, in the dark areas where they did dye it, but it's a little bit of color variation, almost like a gradient, at least in the where it's darker in this dark brown, black area. So that's a really pretty design there. So the next piece we're gonna look at is this piece. Grab my notes. Like I said, my mother helped me with this. She grew up on the Navajo reservation. She actually lives here in Oklahoma, which is nice, so I can go see her anytime I have questions. This piece right here is called the 2 Gray Hill Rugs. So from what my mother told me, like I said, my grandmother traveled around a lot. She sold many of her rugs. So near Crystal, Arizona was the 2 Gray Hills trading post where weavers brought their rugs to sell or trade for goods. The design is very complex and geometric patterns, usually based on large hook central diamonds with a multiple geometric border. Colors range of creamy whites, tans, browns, and grays. So this is very traditional colors to use for the 2 Gray Hills design. Many of these would be based near their trading post area. There's still trading posts out there today, so there's still Navajo people that still make rugs and then sell them or barter with them at the trading posts. And my great-grandmother would do the same, or she'd sell them at the flea markets there. So they're very different from our flea markets here in Oklahoma. Instead they're selling turquoise jewelry and handmade rugs. So that's a big difference. But these are a beautiful pattern. It's very geometric. This style is actually kind of one of my personal favorites. I really enjoy this style, but I do like most rugs when I get to look at them. So we have some really beautiful coloring here and very natural colors. The dyes for natural colors would come from different plants, from different, some are from like nuts or even from bugs that may grow on different things. So, and as we're zooming in, they were showing how tightly woven it is. That's another indicator on how skilled that weaver is. Like I said, when I started, mine is not that tight. It's not but for a first one, it was pretty good, I think, in my mind. So it's a very nice piece. So here we have a second rug. This one is the saddle blanket. So a saddle blanket would have been used on the horseback a long time ago. They would actually use sheepskin. So it's like a woolly texture from the sheep, and they would just put the skin on to kind of help with comfort. But then they started making these. They're simple design rugs, and when I did my weaving for the first time with my great-grandmother, this is kind of the style you start out with if you're learning to weave a Navajo rug. You start with lines, just up and down, and then from here you have to learn how to count up to how many, and this is where the math comes in because you have so many to go up, but then you're trying to keep the widths the same as well throughout this piece. So someone was trying really hard to try to keep, this one's a little bigger, this one's shorter, but this would have been used for a saddle. This one's a little more roughed used, it looks like, so it could have been used on horseback, or it could have been used to be sat on or different things like that. But they come in this size, they come in bigger sizes, but this is beautifully done. And like I said, it's simple, but if you're learning how to weave, this is what you would start out with. It's a very nice, beautiful piece here. And let's see if the tag can give us any more information. It says 1930s on it. It also says Wide Ruin Navajo, so that could be a certain design as well. But like I said, this one has a really nice color, and there's some changes too. So if it's a beginner rug, usually my great-grandma, she gave me like some of her scraps or things that she wasn't using at the time. So that's really nice. And I know my uncle made one, and his is all like different colors when he made his first rug. And he never picked up weaving, but he did make a couple under my grandma's teachings. So it's really fun. It's a tedious work for sure. It took me like all summer just to make that rug, and I think I was about 9 or 10 when I made it. So for a 9 to 10-year-old to make that over 2 months, it was just lines. It was pretty difficult. I didn't do the finishing though. My great-grandmother did that for me. So that's when she was actually here in Oklahoma, the farthest east she had ever been from the Navajo Reservation. Now we're gonna look at some of these on here. So let me pull my notes up. We also have this style here. It's similar to the Eye Dazzler that we saw earlier. This is a Chinle style rug according to my mother. It features bands of repeating style alternating with plain or striped bands of contrasting colors. The common colors for the Chinle rugs include yellow, gold, brown, tan, terracotta, soft pink, as well as natural wool colors ranging from white to black. So this is another style of rug that could be given as gifts, different things like that. But it's beautifully done as well. It kind of reminds you of the Eye Dazzler earlier. And like any of these rugs, some of them would be used for saddle blankets or just used as decorative purposes. Some of them would be used possibly in ceremonial, and then a big thing they were used for was trading for different things. I know my great-grandmother would trade her own rugs for jewelry. She would trade her own rugs for sheep. I remember one time we had come out to visit her from Oklahoma, and she needed to get a sheep because we were gonna have a family get-together, and she was gonna cook the poor sheep. But she traded one of her smaller rugs for like 3 sheep. So that's kind of how they're still trading out there. So some people still make these and they'll trade. I myself being an artist, I've traded art for other pieces of art of other artists because I really liked it, and so we did some bartering there. So I still do it, and a lot of other people still do it today, and especially with rugs. This is a nice piece. I like the orange color here, and you can tell some parts it is a natural wool because you can see where the gradients are as you look around on this piece. The orange, you can really see it. You can see where it gets lighter, then it may get darker in some areas, and the dark brown and black here, you can see where it gets darker, and then the really nice gray background for it. So this is a really nice piece here, and I think the tags here, be very careful. See if it gives us any other information. It does not. Just photo inventory 40. So it's probably about the same time frame as these other rugs. It's kind of worn. There's some spots where the natural dye has kind of moved on to the rest of the piece. So in the white, you can really see where the orange kind of rubbed off in those areas. So that's kind of some key features you can kind of look at if you're looking to purchase older Navajo rugs. There are still many Navajo weavers today that still make their rugs traditionally with traditional colors. Next piece we're gonna look at are these right here. So, of course, during World War II, the Nazi regime and everything, they decided to use this similar symbol for their warring and their symbol for what they were doing. But for Navajos and the Diné people, which is the other word we use for ourselves as Navajo people, Diné, they've been using this symbol way longer than Hitler and Nazis and World War II, way before then. So this is actually called the Whirling logs rug design. So that's kind of what the symbols are here in the middle. These are still used today. For a while after World War II, it became a negative association to have this symbol. But a lot of weavers are now starting to use the symbol to kind of reclaim that back from World War II era. Because for a while, nobody wanted to be associated with this because of what happened. But these were sacred Navajo emblems, and they're considered translated into English as whirling logs. The symbols represent humanity, life. The 4 directions are 4 sacred mountains. They also represent constellation, the moon, the sun, and the equinox. So it's just pretty much the rotation of life for the Navajo people. So it's just representing that. So weavers still do use those in their weaving today. These are some older pieces, about 1900 is, so over 100 years. we were talking earlier as well, trying to decide if it was more commercially dyed. We're thinking they are, since it's a lot darker, and you can compare it to some of our other pieces next to it, because it's like a solid color all the way down. There's really no difference in the shade or anything versus some of the other pieces over here where they actually do change color as they go up or down. So that's another way you can tell if it's commercially dyed or naturally dyed, is the color variation. If there's a lot of color variation, it's probably more natural dye. But even so, this is still a very nice piece. Sometimes Navajo weavers don't have time to always cart their wool, so they may go and then also go and collect the natural dyes. So they may just purchase dyes. My great-grandmother did that as well, so she knew both processes. It just depended on how much time she had. So here we're also gonna look at these two. This is actually a little woven rug, kind of a representation of what one of these bigger ones would be. So I think the biggest one we have here is the Eye Dazzler, and the Eye Dazzler is pretty long. It looks like we were to roll it out, so you'd probably need a loom that was this tall. There is a lady that made the largest Navajo rug in the world, and I think it took up like the whole floor of this room. It was huge, and that would have taken her a lot of time. But this one has natural wood. There are metal looms. My great-grandmother has worked on a traditional loom like this, where it was made of all wood. And then she also had a metal loom. Now her tools would have been the same as wood. So this piece here, I can't remember the Navajo names, because they all have different Navajo names and they represent different things. But there's certain sticks like this, little wooden, almost like dowels, that you would actually go out into the desert to collect yourself when you become officially become a weaver. And so my great-grandmother had several of these different tools in her kit as she would weave. And what's really neat, though, is we pulled this from the Education Collection, so this one I can hold. This is a representation, a small representation of what the our little looms would have looked like. And so my great-grandmother would actually sit on blankets or pillows, and she would set her loom up in the living room. When she stayed with us in Oklahoma, she had her loom out in the middle of the living room. It was a great talking point when people came over. They were like, "What is that?" And my grandma over there weaving. And it's really nice, but you can kind of see in this one, she actually has a small one. And so hopefully you can see it. So just like in the big one, there's one here. So what it does is it helps open up the strands, and then you could run your yarn all the way through. And then you would have a little comb that you would pat down the yarn with. And then you would take this out and then weave it back through to do the next layer. So I remember learning that from her. And then of course we have our little baby here. Maybe at some point we'll do a video on cradle boards. I was in a cradle board when I was a baby, so this was how she would watch us sometimes. She would just wrap us up and stick us in the corner. And then we wouldn't be a problem. We couldn't run anywhere. So, but this is a representation of like they do make these at flea markets. They're really fun. And many artists may just sell these for like a tourist type thing. So, but there is a little person on the back. It looks like a Navajo being called a Yeti. So it looks like somebody did weave a small little image onto this tiny loom, just to kind of show and represent kind of how we have our older looms here. So it's just to kind of show how the weaving, and people like to see in progress work like crazy. This one, I'm gonna leave for last, because actually this style came out from where my family's from, Lukachukai, Arizona, on the Navajo Reservation. This is a style called the Yebiche rug. Yebiches are our spiritual beings. We call them Yetis. They're our holy people. They're an equivalent of what I could say, to make a comparison sort of. It's sort of like angels in a way, but we view them differently. But they're protectors, they're our guides. And during certain ceremonies, which are performed between October and probably the middle of March, the Yebiche dances, where we have medicine men and women dress up as our spiritual beings with masks and everything to represent those deities, the Yebiche. So we call those the Yebiche. So here we have a very nice image of the Yebiche dancers. Usually there's between 7, 8 to about 12 dancers that can be represented on a rug. But they're traditionally, if you were to see them, the only way we can kind of depict them is through art. We're not supposed to take photos of the Yebiche dancers when they're performing at all. You may find some online that are kind of rare, but for a lot of Navajo people, out of respect, we do not take pictures of them. But we can show them in our art. It's very similar to sand painting. If you've ever seen Navajo sand painting, I have participated in a sand painting ceremony, so it's very, the lines are very strict, and instead of using sand here, they're using weaving, so it looks like they have just different emblems. They're all wearing their skirts, and then you see their little boots, kind of their moccasins. And then usually they either have a white or a blue face, so sometimes you may see them with blue faces or a white face. You can even see where they put jewelry on the beings here. But this is a representation of our sacred beings. So these became very popular, and like I said, they came out of the Lukachukai area, and my great-grandmother would make several of these because she was from that area, so it was kind of the first kind of form she was introduced to. But she could also make the 2 gray hills as well, and some of these other designs. So it just kind of, she had creative freedom to do that, and when people started to be introduced to more colors and more dyes, commercial dyes, the Navajo culture just took it. There are some with birds on it. There's some that they've done like a train. Some have even done Navajo homesteads where they weave in mesas, and it's just really interesting. And there's an artist I know who had started a piece, and he's actually weaving a picture of his grandmother who was the weaver that taught him. And he's weaving like a canvas to look like the photo. And it's really good, and so if you stand far away, it looks like the photo. Just like with anything, you stand up close, you're kind of like, what is this? But if you stand further away, it makes more sense. So I'm sure if we took the eye dazzler and hung it up, you could see how it would kind of move interestingly. So, well, hopefully y'all enjoyed that today. It's a lot of information, but I'm very passionate about this area, especially my native culture, so I always like to give my thoughts and how I view things. And actually growing up with a grandmother that wove is really neat, and having some of her pieces, having some of her things she's passed down to us, it's really neat, and it makes it more concrete for me. So when I see rugs in museums, I do have to keep an eye on my mother when I take her to museums, because we want to touch the rugs. Because it feels, if you get a chance to, and if you want to touch all the rugs you want, you can always visit the Navajo area, visit the trading posts, and they'll let you touch all the rugs you want, as long as you purchase one. So they're really nice. They can be kind of rough. Navajo people used to make dresses out of them. We still do today. They're usually only done for ceremonial reasons. Like I said, this is more a contemporary dress and skirt, but I do have woven rugs as well. That's a Navajo woven rug dress that I could show at some point. But that's how they would use it until we started getting more cloth material. So they would actually make clothing out of the wool and different things like that. So if you all have any questions, definitely shoot us a message on our social media or send us an email at education@mgmoa.org. So ahiyahet, and thank you for joining us today.